The Atlanta courtroom buzzed with a restless energy, its polished wood benches packed with spectators shifting in their seats. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting slanted beams across the room, but it did little to warm the sterile air. At the defense table, Maya Jackson sat with her back straight, her dark eyes scanning every detail: the scuff on the bailiff's shoe, the prosecutor's too-tight tie, the faint tremor in the juror's hand as she clutched a notepad. Beside her, her younger brother, Ethan, barely 19, fidgeted, his navy suit a size too big, borrowed from a cousin. His knee bounced under the table, betraying the fear he tried to hide. Maya reached over, her hand steady as she squeezed his. "Breathe," she whispered, her voice low but firm. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight, but his eyes darted toward the judge's bench, where Judge Harold Grayson loomed like a vulture. Grayson, in his late 60s, with thinning gray hair and a permanent scowl, had a reputation for ruling his courtroom like a fiefdom. His black robe seemed to amplify his arrogance, and as he shuffled papers, his lips curled into a smirk that set Maya's nerves on edge. The charges against Ethan were flimsy but vicious. Resisting arrest, stemming from a traffic stop 3 months ago. The officer claimed Ethan had been belligerent, but the body cam footage was conveniently unavailable. Maya had seen the bruises on Ethan's arms, the split lip he'd come home with that night. She'd also seen the police report riddled with inconsistencies. As a paralegal, she knew the system's tricks, how it could twist a black teenager's fear into a weapon. But today, she wasn't just a paralegal. She carried a secret that burned in her chest, one she wasn't ready to reveal. Not yet. "All rise," the bailiff barked, and the room snapped to attention. Grayson entered, his robes swishing as he settled into his chair. He surveyed the courtroom with a look that said he'd already made up his mind. Maya's stomach tightened, but she kept her face neutral, her notepad open, her pen poised. She'd learned long ago to hide her anger, to channel it into precision. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein, stood first. Klein was in his early 40s, with slick-back hair and a practiced charm that didn't reach his eyes. He buttoned his jacket, flashing a smile at the jury: 7 women, 5 men, a mix of ages and races, but only 2 black faces among them. Maya noted the way one juror, a middle-aged white woman, leaned forward, already swayed by Klein's confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Klein began, his voice smooth as polished glass, "this case is simple. Ethan Jackson resisted a lawful arrest, endangering an officer who was doing his duty. The evidence will show a pattern of defiance, a disregard for authority." He paused, letting his words sink in, his gaze lingering on Ethan, who shrank slightly in his seat. Maya scribbled notes, her handwriting sharp and deliberate. Pattern of defiance. Ethan had no record, no priors. Klein was painting a narrative, and the jury was eating it up. She glanced at their defense attorney, Marcus Reed, a public defender in his late 20s, earnest but overworked. His tie was crooked, and his briefcase spilled papers. Maya had tried to prep him, but he'd brushed her off, saying he had it under control. Now, as he fumbled with his opening statement, she wasn't so sure. "Your Honor, the defense will show that my client was unjustly targeted," Reed said, his voice cracking slightly. This was a routine traffic stop that escalated due to the officer's aggression. He gestured toward Ethan, who kept his eyes down. "My client is a college student, a good kid." Objection. Klein cut in, standing. "Counsel is appealing to emotion, not fact." Sustained, Grayson said, his tone bored. "Stick to the case, Mr. Reed." Maya's grip on her pen tightened. Grayson's bias was already showing, and they hadn't even gotten to the witnesses. She leaned toward Reed, whispering, "Push the lack of body cam footage. It's their weak spot." Reed nodded but looked rattled, his confidence eroding. The prosecution called its first witness, Officer Daniel Hargrove, the man who'd arrested Ethan. Hargrove was broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a swagger that filled the room. He took the stand, swearing in with a practiced ease, his blue uniform crisp. Klein led him through the story, a routine stop for a broken taillight, Ethan's aggressive behavior, a struggle when Hargrove tried to cuff him. Hargrove's voice was steady, his eyes locked on Klein, avoiding Ethan entirely. Maya watched the jury, The middle-aged woman nodded slightly, buying Hargrove's story. But a younger juror, a black man in his 30s, frowned, his arms crossed. Maya made a mental note he might be their ally. She jotted down Hargrove's exact words, looking for cracks. He said Ethan lunged at him. No mention of that in the report. She'd need to tell Reed to press on cross-examination. When Reed's turn came, he stood, adjusting his glasses. "Officer Hargrove, you stated my client resisted immediately. Can you clarify what he did?" Hargrove leaned back, unfazed. He refused to comply, raised his voice, then tried to push past me. "Tried to push past you," Reed repeated. "But the police report doesn't mention any physical contact initiated by Mr. Jackson. Can you explain that?" Hargrove's jaw twitched, but he recovered quickly. "It was a chaotic situation. Reports don't catch every detail." Maya's pulse quickened. "That was a dodge." She whispered to Reed, "Ask about the body cam." Reed hesitated, then nodded. "Officer, was your body camera active during the incident?" Reed asked. "It malfunctioned," Hargrove said, his tone flat. "Technical issue. Convenient," Reed muttered, loud enough for the jury to hear. A few jurors shifted, their expressions skeptical. "Enough," Grayson snapped, glaring at Reed. "You're out of line, counsel." Maya's frustration boiled, but she kept her face impassive. Grayson was shutting down their best angle. She glanced at Ethan, whose hands were clenched in his lap. She wanted to tell him it would be okay, but the truth was, the deck was stacked. Klein's smug grin as he returned to his seat only confirmed it. As the session broke for lunch, the courtroom emptied, leaving Maya and Ethan alone with Reed. Ethan slumped in his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're gonna lock me up, aren't they?" "No," Maya said, her tone fierce. "We're not done yet." She turned to Reed, her eyes blazing. "You need to hit harder on cross. Hargrove's lying, and the jury's starting to see it." Reed sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm doing what I can, Maya. Grayson's not giving me room." "Then make room," she shot back. She stood, smoothing her blazer, her mind racing. She hadn't planned to step into the spotlight so soon, but Grayson's arrogance and Klein's manipulations were pushing her hand. In her bag, tucked beneath her notepad, was her FBI badge, her trump card. She'd joined the Bureau 2 years ago, after years as a paralegal, driven by cases like Ethan's. Her current assignment was unrelated, but her status gave her authority, a voice the courtroom couldn't ignore. She just needed the right moment. Back in session, Klein called a second witness, a bystander who claimed Ethan had been hostile. The woman, nervous and middle-aged, stumbled through her testimony. Her story vague. Reed's cross was weak, and Grayson dismissed her quickly. His patience thinning, Maya's notes piled up, her handwriting sharper with every inconsistency. Finally, Reed called Maya to the stand, a last-minute decision after her insistence. She walked to the witness box, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, every eye on her. She swore in, her voice clear, her posture unyielding. Reed asked her to describe Ethan's character, and she spoke with quiet conviction: his scholarship to Morehouse, his volunteer work, his fear after the arrest. Klein stood for cross-examination, his smile predatory. "Ms. Jackson, you're a paralegal, correct? Not a lawyer." "That's right," Maya said, meeting his gaze. "So your opinions on this case, they're just that, opinions, not expertise." His tone dripped with condescension. Maya's lips twitched, a hint of a smile. "I know the law, Murdoch Klein, and I know when evidence doesn't add up." The gallery murmured. Grayson banged his gavel, his face reddening. "Ms. Jackson, you will refrain from grandstanding in my courtroom. You're not here to play lawyer." Maya held his stare, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "With respect, Your Honor, I'm here to tell the truth." Grayson's eyes narrowed, his smirk returning. "The truth. Save it for someone who cares. Step down." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. Maya descended from the stand, her head high, her secret burning brighter. Grayson thought he'd won, but he'd just lit a fuse. As the session adjourned, Klein whispered to an aide, his confidence unshaken. The jury filed out, some glancing at Maya with curiosity, others with doubt. Ethan leaned close, his voice shaky. "What now?" Maya's eyes glinted, her resolve ironclad. Now we fight. The Atlanta courtroom felt smaller today, the air thick with anticipation and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Maya Jackson sat at the defense table, her notepad filled with meticulous observations from the first day of her brother Ethan's trial. Ethan, dressed in the same borrowed navy suit, stared at his hands, his knuckles pale from gripping the table's edge. The charge-resisting arrest hung over him like a storm cloud, and the prosecution was determined to make it stick. Maya's sharp eyes darted across the room, noting the jurors' tense postures. The prosecutor's calculated calm, and Judge Harold Grayson's imperious scowl as he took his seat. Grayson's gavel cracked like a whip, silencing the murmurs. "Court is in session," he declared, his voice dripping with authority. Maya's stomach churned at his tone, but she kept her face a mask of composure. Yesterday, Grayson had humiliated her on the stand, dismissing her testimony with a sneer. She hadn't revealed her FBI badge then, but the urge to wipe that smirk off his face was growing. For now, she focused on the battle at hand, whispering to Ethan, "Stay strong. We've got this." The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein, wasted no time. Klein stood, his tailored suit pristine, his smile a blade. "Your Honor, the people call Sergeant Michael Torres." Torres, a weary officer with a buzz cut and a tight jaw, strode to the stand. He'd been Hargrove's partner during Ethan's arrest, a secondary figure in the police report, but a key witness now. Klein's questions were precise, guiding Torres to paint Ethan as a volatile teenager who'd escalated a routine stop into chaos. Murdoch Jackson refused to comply, Torres said, his voice clipped. He shouted, flailed his arms, made it impossible to restrain him safely. The words were rehearsed, Maya noted, to polished. She jotted down every phrase, her pen digging into the paper. The jury leaned forward, some nodding, others scribbling notes. The middle-aged white woman from yesterday, Juror 6, seemed particularly swayed, her lips pursed in disapproval. Maya glanced at their defense attorney, Marcus Reed, who was shuffling papers nervously. Reed had potential but lacked the grit to match Klein's theatrics. She leaned toward him, her voice low. "Torres didn't mention shouting in the report. Push him on that." Reed nodded, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. Maya's frustration simmered. She couldn't fight this battle for him, not yet. On cross-examination, Reed stood, his tie still askew. "Sergeant Torres, you said Mr. Jackson was shouting. Can you specify what he said?" Torres hesitated, his eyes flicking to Klein. "It was chaotic. I don't recall exact words. But you recall him flailing," Reed pressed, gaining a sliver of confidence. "The police report doesn't mention shouting or flailing. Why the discrepancy?" "Reports aren't verbatim," Torres said, recovering. "They capture the essence." Maya's pen paused. "Essence, a dodge, just like Hargrove's malfunctioning body cam." She whispered to Reed, "Ask if he saw Ethan strike anyone." Reed nodded. Turning back to Torres, "Did Mr. Jackson make physical contact with you or Officer Hargrove?" Reed asked. "No," Torres admitted, his tone grudging. "But he was aggressive, uncooperative." Reed let the answer hang, a small victory. The black juror in his 30s, Juror 9, raised an eyebrow, his skepticism clear. But Grayson cut in before Reed could build momentum. "Move along, counsel. We're not here for theatrics." His tone was sharp, his bias blatant. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on the jury, gauging their reactions. Klein's next move was a gut punch. He introduced a photo of Ethan's car, zoomed in on a dented fender, implying Ethan had tried to flee. "This damage," Klein said, holding the photo aloft, "shows the defendant's reckless intent." The jury murmured, and Ethan's head snapped up, his voice a harsh whisper. "That dent was there for months." Maya gripped his arm, silencing him. "Don't," she murmured. She turned to Reed, her voice urgent. "Object. That photo's irrelevant without context." Reed hesitated, then stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The photo lacks foundation. There's no evidence tying the dent to the incident." Klein smirked. "The damage speaks for itself, Your Honor." Grayson leaned back, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Overruled. The jury can decide its relevance." Maya's blood boiled. The dent was a red herring, and Grayson was letting Klein run with it. She scribbled furiously, her mind racing for a counterstudy. The prosecution rested its case by mid-morning, and Reed called a witness for the defense, a gas station clerk who'd seen part of the arrest. The clerk, a nervous young woman named Leela Carter, testified that she'd heard no shouting, only Hargrove yelling at Ethan to get down. Her voice shook, and Klein pounced on Cross, twisting her words to suggest she'd been too far to hear clearly. Grayson dismissed her testimony with a wave, saying, "Unreliable." Next, Maya's patience snapped. She leaned toward Reed, her voice a hiss. "You need to fight harder. Grayson's burying us." Reed's shoulders slumped, but he nodded. Calling Ethan's high school coach next, the coach spoke warmly of Ethan's discipline, his scholarship to Morehouse. But Klein objected repeatedly, claiming character testimony was irrelevant. Grayson sustained every objection, his rulings a wall against the defense. By the afternoon, the courtroom crackled with tension. Reed, visibly frayed, called Maya back to the stand, a desperate move to humanize Ethan. Maya walked forward, her heels steady, her blazer crisp. She felt the weight of every eye, Klein's predatory stare, Grayson's dismissive smirk, the jury's guarded curiosity. Reed asked her to recount the night of Ethan's arrest, and she spoke with measured clarity. "Ethan came home bruised, scared," she said. "He told me the officer slammed him against the car for no reason. I saw the marks myself." Her voice was steady, but her words carried a quiet fire. Juror 9 leaned forward, his expression softening. Even Juror 6, Klein's ally, seemed to waver. Klein rose for Cross, his tone dripping with mockery. "Ms. Jackson, you're close to the defendant, aren't you?" "Hardly an impartial witness. I'm his sister," Maya said, unflinching. "But I'm also a paralegal. I know what a clean police report looks like. This one's a mess." The gallery stirred, a ripple of whispers. Klein's smile faltered, but he pressed on. "A paralegal, not a detective. You're speculating, aren't you?" "I'm observing," Maya shot back. "No body cam, inconsistent reports, a dented fender from months ago. That's not evidence, it's a story." Klein opened his mouth, but Grayson banged his gavel, his face a storm. "Ms. Jackson, you are not counsel. You will not lecture this court." His voice was a growl, his eyes boring into her. "One more outburst, and you're in contempt." Maya held his gaze, her heart pounding, but her voice calm. "I understand, Your Honor." She stepped down, her head high, the air electric. The jury was watching her now, not Grayson. She'd planted a seed, and Klein knew it. His jaw was tight as he returned to his seat. As the session broke for recess, the courtroom buzzed. Spectators whispered, and a reporter in the back scribbled furiously. Ethan grabbed Maya's arm, his voice low. "You're making them nervous, but Grayson's gonna crush us." "Not if I can help it," Maya said, her eyes glinting. In her bag, her FBI badge felt heavier, its presence a promise. She hadn't planned to reveal it yet, but Grayson's bias and Klein's lies were forcing her hand. She needed to shift the narrative, to give the jury a reason to doubt the prosecution's flimsy case. Outside the courtroom, Maya overheard Klein speaking to an aide, his voice low but smug. "She's a problem, but Grayson's got our back." The words fueled her resolve. She returned to the defense table, her mind sharpening. Reed looked defeated, but she leaned close, her voice firm. "We've got one more day, use it. Hit them with the witness statement again, and demand the body cam." "Records," Reed sighed. "Grayson won't allow it." "Then make him," Maya said, her tone steel. As the courtroom emptied, she stood, her silhouette framed by the fading sunlight. The fight was far from over, and she was ready to play her trump card. The Atlanta courtroom pulsed with a restless energy as the third day of Ethan Jackson's trial began. The air was heavy, charged with the weight of yesterday's clashes. Maya Jackson sat at the defense table, her posture rigid, her dark eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Her brother Ethan, pale and tense in his ill-fitting suit, kept his gaze fixed on the table, his hands clasped tightly to stop their trembling. The jury filed in, their faces a mix of curiosity and fatigue, while spectators packed the benches, whispering about Maya's bold stand the day before. Judge Harold Grayson's arrival silenced the room. his black robe billowing as he settled into his chair, his scowl deeper than ever. Maya's notepad was a battlefield of ink notes on every witness, every inconsistency, every smirk from Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein. Yesterday, Grayson had nearly held her in contempt for challenging the prosecution's narrative. Today, she was done playing by his rules. In her blazer pocket, her FBI badge waited, a secret weapon she'd held back too long. Her heart thudded, but her resolve was ironclad. This was for Ethan, for every kid like him caught in the system's jaws. Grayson banged his gavel, his voice a low growl. "Court is in session, Dotmer. Reed, call your next witness." Marcus Reed, the young public defender, stood, his tie finally straight, but his nerves still frayed. "The defense recalls Maya Jackson, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Grayson's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his tone dripping with disdain, "I trust you'll refrain from yesterday's theatrics. This is a courtroom, not a stage." Maya rose, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her expression serene but unyielding. "I understand, Your Honor." She took the stand, swearing in with a steady voice, her eyes locking briefly with Ethan's. He gave her a small nod, his fear tempered by trust. The jury watched her closely. Juror 9, the skeptical black man, leaned forward. Juror 6, the prosecution's ally, crossed her arms, wary. Reed approached, his questions careful. "Ms. Jackson, you testified about the night of Ethan's arrest. Can you elaborate on the inconsistencies you observed in the police report?" Maya nodded, her voice clear and measured. "The report claims Ethan was belligerent, but it lacks specifics, no direct quotes, no mention of physical aggression beyond resisting. Officer Hargrave's partner, Sergeant Torres, added details yesterday that weren't in the original document, like shouting and flailing, and the body cam footage, which should have clarified everything, is mysteriously unavailable." Klein shot to his feet. "Objection. The witness is speculating about evidence not in play." Grayson leaned forward, his smirk returning. "Sustained. Ms. Jackson, you're not an expert. Stick to what you know." Maya's eyes flashed, but she kept her tone even. "I know my brother came home with bruises he didn't have before. I know the officer's story keeps changing. And I know the truth matters, even if this court doesn't want to hear it." The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath. Grayson's face reddened, his gavel slamming down. "That's enough, Ms. Jackson, you are out of line. One more word, and you're in a cell." Maya stood, her hands steady as she reached into her pocket. The room seemed to hold its breath. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'm not just a paralegal." She pulled out her badge, holding it aloft, the FBI seal glinting under the courtroom lights. "I'm Special Agent Maya Jackson, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The courtroom erupted. Spectators whispered, jurors gaped, and Klein froze, his pen slipping from his hand. Ethan's eyes widened, a mix of shock and pride. Grayson's smirk vanished, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The bailiff took a step forward, then hesitated, unsure. Maya held the badge high, her gaze locked on Grayson, daring him to challenge her now. "I've spent 2 years investigating cases like this," she continued, her voice rising, steady but fierce. "Cases where the system chews up kids like Ethan, black kids, poor kids, anyone who doesn't fit the script. This isn't about one traffic stop. It's about a pattern. No body cam, shifting stories, a dented fender waved around like it's proof. You call that justice? I call it a setup." The jury was riveted. Juror 9 nodded slightly, his arms uncrossed. Even Juror 6 looked shaken, her notepad forgotten. Klein scrambled to his feet, his voice shrill. "Objection. This is irrelevant, inflammatory, overruled," Grayson snapped, but his voice lacked its usual bite. He was rattled, his authority slipping. Maya pressed on, her words a blade. "I'm not here to grandstand," she said, turning to the jury. "I'm here because my brother's life is on the line, because the truth is buried under lies and excuses. You have the power to see through it. Look at the evidence or the lack of it. Ask why the story keeps changing. Ask why a 19-year-old kid with no record is being painted as a monster. The room was silent, her words hanging in the air. Reed, emboldened, stepped forward. No further questions. Your Honor. Maya stepped down, her head high, the badge still in her hand. Klein's face was a mask of fury, but he said nothing, his strategy unraveling. The gallery buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously, their pens a frenzy of motion. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice strained. We'll take a recess. 30 minutes. He banged his gavel, but the sound was hollow, lacking its usual command. As he retreated to his chambers, his shoulders were slumped, his arrogance deflated. Maya returned to the defense table, where Ethan grabbed her hand, his voice a whisper. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. I didn't plan to, she admitted, her pulse still racing. But Grayson pushed me too far. Reed, for once, looked energized. That was a game changer, Maya. The jury's listening now. Don't get cocky, she warned, but her lips twitched with a faint smile. She glanced at the jury as they filed out, catching Juror 9's eye. He gave her a subtle nod, a spark of solidarity. Juror 6, though, looked conflicted, her loyalty to Klein wavering. Outside the courtroom, the hallway was chaos. Spectators clustered, their voices a hum of excitement. A reporter approached Maya, her recorder thrust forward. Ms. Jackson, is it true you're an FBI agent? What's your next move? Maya's expression was steel. My next move is getting justice for my brother. That's all you need to know. She pushed past, guiding Ethan toward a quiet corner. He leaned against the wall, his breathing uneven. You think it worked? He asked, his voice small. It's working, Maya said, her tone firm. But Klein's not done. Neither am I. Back in the courtroom, Klein huddled with his team, his face tight with calculation. He'd underestimated Maya, and now the jury was slipping from his grasp. As the recess ended, Grayson returned, his composure forced. He called for order, but his eyes avoided Maya, a crack in his armor. The defense called its next witness, a mechanic who confirmed the dent on Ethan's car predated the arrest. Klein's cross was weak, his confidence shaken. Maya watched the jury, her speech still echoing in their minds. She'd exposed the case's flaws, but the fight wasn't over. Klein would regroup, and Grayson would push back. Her badge had shifted the tide, but the war for Ethan's freedom was far from won. The Atlanta courtroom was a pressure cooker as the fourth day of Ethan Jackson's trial dawned. The revelation of Maya Jackson's FBI status had sent shockwaves through the room, and the air crackled with tension. Spectators packed the benches, their whispers a constant hum while reporters scribbled notes, their eyes darting between Maya and the prosecution's table. Maya sat beside Ethan, her posture unyielding, her dark eyes sharp as she scanned the jury. Ethan, his borrowed suit now creased from days of stress, gripped her hand under the table. His knuckles pale, Judge Harold Grayson's gavel slammed down, silencing the room. But his usual arrogance was tempered, his jaw tight as he avoided Maya's gaze. Maya's notepad was a war map every juror's reaction, every flaw on the prosecution's case meticulously recorded. Her badge, now back in her pocket, had shifted the trial's momentum. But she knew Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein wouldn't go down without a fight. Klein stood at his table, his slick-back hair gleaming under the lights, his smile a thin veneer over barely concealed fury. The jury, a mix of skepticism and intrigue, watched him closely, their trust in his narrative shaken by Maya's speech yesterday. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice strained. Court is in session, Dotmer. Klein, proceed. Klein buttoned his jacket, his confidence forced. Your Honor, the people call Dr. Alan Ramsey. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Dr. Ramsey, a forensic psychologist, took the stand, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her demeanor clinical. Klein's questions were surgical, designed to rebuild his case. Dr. Ramsey, in your expert opinion, what motivates someone to resist arrest? Ramsey adjusted her glasses. Fear, anger, or a pattern of defiance can lead to such behavior. Young men, especially under stress, may act impulsively, escalating situations. Klein nodded, turning to the jury. And would you say a 19-year-old with no prior record could still exhibit This defiance. Absolutely, Ramsey said. A single incident can reveal underlying tendencies. Maya's pen dug into her notepad. Underlying tendencies? Klein was trying to paint Ethan as a ticking time bomb, despite no evidence. She leaned toward Marcus Reed, their public defender, whose newfound confidence from yesterday was wavering. Object, she whispered. This is speculative character assassination. Reed stood, his voice steadier than before. Objection, Your Honor. The witness's testimony is speculative and lacks relevance to the specific incident. Klein smirked. It establishes the defendant's state of mind, Your Honor. Grayson leaned back, his eyes flicking to Maya before settling on Reed. Overruled. The testimony stands. His tone was curt, but less venomous than usual. Maya's presence had rattled him, and he was treading carefully. Klein's next move was a direct attack on Maya. He called a surprise witness, a former colleague from her paralegal days, Peter Hensley. Hensley, a nervous man in his 50s, testified that Maya had once overstepped her role, questioning a case's evidence too aggressively. She acted like she was the lawyer, he said, avoiding Maya's gaze. Klein pounced. So, Ms. Jackson has a history of inserting herself into legal matters. Beyond her expertise. Yes, Hensley mumbled, his face flushed. Maya's blood boiled, but she kept her expression neutral. Klein was trying to discredit her FBI reveal, to paint her as a meddler. She whispered to Reed, cross him. Ask if I was right about that case. Reed nodded, standing. Mr. Hensley, Reed began, when Ms. Jackson questioned that case. Was her analysis correct? Did it lead to any outcomes? Hensley shifted uncomfortably. It prompted a review. The case was dropped. The gallery stirred, and Juror 9, the skeptical black man, raised an eyebrow. Klein's smirk faltered, but he recovered, redirecting to Ramsey, hammering the defiant youth narrative. Maya's notes piled up, her handwriting sharp with frustration. Klein was slippery, but he was losing ground. The defense's turn came, and Reed, bolstered by Maya's coaching, played their strongest card, video evidence. He introduced a grainy security clip from a nearby store, showing part of Ethan's arrest. The footage was blurry, but it captured Officer Hargrove shoving Ethan against the car, his knee pressing into Ethan's back. Ethan's hands were raised, his voice inaudible but his body language submissive. Reed turned to the jury, his voice firm. This is not resistance. This is a teenager being manhandled. The jury leaned forward, Juror 6's arms uncrossing, her expression troubled. Even Juror 2, a staunch prosecution supporter, frowned. Klein objected, claiming the video lacked context. The footage is incomplete, Your Honor. It doesn't show the full incident, Reed countered. It shows enough. The officer's aggression is clear. Grayson, visibly irritated, allowed the video but limited Reed's commentary. The jury will interpret it themselves, he snapped. Maya's jaw tightened. Grayson was still protecting Klein, but the video had landed. The jury's faces, some shocked, others conflicted, told her it was working. As the session broke for lunch, the courtroom buzzed. Outside, reporters swarmed, their questions a barrage. Agent Jackson, is the FBI investigating this case? One shouted. Maya's response was cool. I'm here for my brother. That's my focus. But whispers of her FBI status had spread beyond the courtroom, drawing local news vans to the courthouse steps. Back in session, Klein fought to regain control, recalling Hargrove to clarify the video. Hargrove claimed Ethan had lurched before the footage started, justifying his force. Reed's cross was sharp, exposing Hargrove's shifting story, but Grayson cut it short, his patience thinning. Maya watched the jury, noting Juror 9's clenched jaw, Juror 6's furrowed brow. They were questioning Klein's case, but Grayson's rulings kept the defense on a leash. In a bold move, Reed called Maya again, this time to testify about Ethan's injuries. She described the bruises, the split lip, her voice steady but laced with pain. Klein's cross was vicious, accusing her of bias. You're an FBI agent, Ms. Jackson, but you're also the defendant's sister. Your testimony is clouded, isn't it? Maya met his gaze, unflinching. My badge doesn't change the truth. I saw what that officer did to my brother. The gallery murmured, and Grayson banged his gavel, his face a storm. "Ms. Jackson, you will not lecture this court again." But his voice lacked its earlier venom. Maya's calm defiance was unnerving him, and Klein's frustration was palpable. As the day ended, Grayson sent the jury to deliberate, his dismissal curt. The courtroom emptied, but the tension lingered. Ethan leaned close to Maya, his voice shaky. "That video, you think it's enough?" "It's a start," Maya said, her tone firm. "We've got them on their heels." She glanced at Reed, who was packing his briefcase, his exhaustion evident. "Good work with the video," she said. "Keep pushing," Reed nodded, a spark of determination returning. "Klein's scrambling, but Grayson's still a problem." "Let me worry about Grayson," Maya said, her eyes glinting. Outside, the media frenzy grew, cameras flashing as she and Ethan stepped into the sunlight. A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Agent Jackson, are you accusing the police of misconduct?" Maya's response was measured, but her resolve was steel. "I'm saying the evidence speaks for itself, and it's not done talking." Inside, Klein huddled with his team, his voice low but tense. "She's turning this into a circus. We need to bury her credibility." His aide nodded, already typing on a phone. Maya didn't hear them, but she felt the shift. The counterattack was coming, and she was ready. The Atlanta courthouse was a fortress of tension as the fifth day of Ethan Jackson's trial unfolded. The air inside the courtroom was stifling, thick with the weight of anticipation. Maya Jackson sat at the defense table, her posture rigid, her dark eyes fixed on the empty jury box. Her brother Ethan, his face drawn from sleepless nights, tugged nervously at the cuffs of his borrowed navy suit. The gallery was packed, spectators cramming the benches, their whispers a low hum. Reporters lined the back, their notebooks open, pens poised to capture the climax of a trial that had gripped the city. Outside, news vans clustered, their antennas piercing the gray morning sky. Maya's notepad lay closed, its pages filled with for days of meticulous observations. Every juror's glance, every lie from the prosecution, every biased ruling from Judge Harold Grayson. Her FBI badge, now common knowledge after her bombshell reveal, rested in her pocket, a silent reminder of the authority she'd wielded to shift the trial's tide. Her speech about systemic bias had resonated, and the security footage of Officer Hargreaves' aggression had cracked the prosecution's narrative. But the jury's decision loomed, and doubt gnawed at her. Had she done enough? Grayson's arrival silenced the room, his gavel a sharp crack. His scowl was deeper today, his arrogance bruised by Maya's defiance. He settled into his chair, his eyes skimming over her without lingering. "Court is in session," he said, his voice clipped. "The jury is deliberating. We'll reconvene when they reach a verdict." Maya glanced at Ethan, whose knee bounced under the table. She squeezed his hand, her voice low. "They saw the truth, Ethan. Hold on." He nodded, but his eyes were glassy, fear etched into every line of his face. The charges resisting arrest carried a sentence of up to a year, but the real punishment was the stain on his future, the way the system could mark a black teenager for life. Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein sat at the prosecution's table, his slicked-back hair slightly disheveled, his usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped frown. Maya's revelation and the damning video had rattled him, and his attempts to discredit her had backfired. The jury's faces during deliberations. Juror 9's quiet nod. Juror 6's troubled frown suggested Klein's grip was slipping. Still, he leaned toward his aide, whispering fiercely, plotting one last move. Marcus Reed, the defense attorney, sat beside Maya, his tie straight for once, his exhaustion tempered by a flicker of hope. "That video was our ace," he murmured. "And your speech, it hit hard. They're thinking twice now. Don't count on it," Maya said, her tone cautious. "Klein's desperate, and Grayson's still against us." She glanced at the judge, whose curt dismissal of their evidence yesterday still stung. Grayson wanted control, and her FBI status had challenged that. She'd seen the way he'd glared at her during recesses, his pride wounded. The weight stretched on, hours crawling by. The courtroom emptied for a recess, leaving Maya and Ethan alone with Reed. They moved to a quiet corner of the hallway, the marble floor echoing their steps. Ethan slumped against the wall, his voice barely above a whisper. What if they believe Klein? What if they think I'm some thug? Maya crouched to meet his gaze, her voice fierce but tender. They won't. You're a college student, a good kid. They saw Hargrave's knee on your back. They heard me. We're not invisible anymore. She paused, her mind drifting to their childhood nights in their cramped apartment, their mother working double shifts, Maya promising to protect him. Her FBI career, born from years of watching the system fail families like theirs, had led to this moment. She wouldn't let Ethan down. Ethan's eyes softened, a faint smile breaking through. You always been my shield, Maya. Even when I was little, and I always will be, she said, standing, her resolve steel. Let's go back in. The courtroom reconvened, but the jury remained out. Grayson's impatience was palpable, his fingers drumming on the bench. Klein paced subtly, his confidence eroding. Maya watched the juror's door, her heart pounding. Juror 9, the black man who'd nodded at her, was her anchor. He'd seen the truth. But Juror 6, the middle-aged white woman swayed by Klein early on, was a wild card. Had the video and Maya's words reached her? Finally, at 3:17 p.m., the bailiff announced, the jury has a verdict. The room snapped to attention, a collective breath held. Maya's pulse raced, but she kept her face impassive, her hand gripping Ethan's under the table. The jurors filed in, their expressions unreadable. Juror 9's jaw was set, his eyes steady. Juror 6 clutched her notepad, her lips tight. Grayson leaned forward, his voice formal but strained. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a gray-haired woman in her 60s, stood. We have, Your Honor. She handed a folded paper to the bailiff, who passed it to Grayson. He unfolded it, his face betraying nothing as he read. Read the verdict, he ordered. The foreperson cleared her throat, her voice steady. In the matter of the state of Georgia versus Ethan Jackson, on the charge of resisting arrest, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Ethan gasped, his head dropping into his hands, tears streaming. Maya pulled him into a fierce hug, her own eyes stinging, but her face composed. The gallery buzzed, spectators cheering, reporters scrambling to capture the moment. Klein's face was a mask of fury, his pen snapping in his hand. Reed exhaled, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. Grayson banged his gavel, his voice sharp. Order, this is a courtroom, not a circus. His dismissal was curt, his frustration clear. He turned to Ethan, his tone cold. Mr. Jackson, you are free to go. Court is adjourned. He stood abruptly, his robes swishing as he retreated to his chambers, his authority diminished. Maya stood, guiding Ethan to his feet. His legs wobbled, but his smile was radiant. It's over, he whispered, disbelief in his voice. It's over, Maya echoed, her voice firm. But her mind was already racing ahead. The verdict was a victory, but Hargrove was still on the force, and the system that targeted Ethan hadn't changed. Her fight was far from done. As they stepped into the hallway, the media swarm descended, cameras flashing, microphones thrusting forward. Agent Jackson, what's next? A reporter shouted. Will you pursue action against the officer? Maya's response was measured, her eyes steely. This is just the beginning. The evidence showed the truth, and I'm not stopping until justice is fully served. She guided Ethan through the crowd, her arm around his shoulders, shielding him from the chaos. Outside, the Atlanta skyline loomed under a cloudy sky, the air crisp with the promise of rain. Ethan paused, breathing deeply, his freedom sinking in. I thought I'd be in a cell tonight, he said, his voice soft. You're here, Maya said, her tone fierce. And you're staying here. She glanced at the courthouse, her mind on Hargrove, on the police department's patterns, on the bigger fight ahead. Her FBI role gave her leverage, and she'd use it. A reporter broke through, her recorder outstretched. Agent Jackson, are you planning a civil suit or an investigation into the police? Maya's lips curved, not a smile, but a promise. I'm planning to do what's right. Watch and see. She turned, leading Ethan toward their car, the weight of the trial lifting, but a new burden settling in. The city watched, and Maya was ready to make it listen. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan Jackson's not guilty verdict, but the echoes of the trial still reverberated through Atlanta. The city hummed with debate. Local news channels replaying clips of Maya Jackson's courtroom speech, her FBI badge gleaming under the lights. Social media buzzed with hashtags #Justice for Ethan, #Maya Jackson, while protests outside the police precinct demanded accountability for Officer Daniel Hargrove. Maya, now a reluctant public figure, balanced her FBI duties with a growing role as an advocate. Her resolve hardened by the trial's fallout. Ethan's freedom was a victory, but the system that targeted him remained intact, and she was determined to chip away at its foundations. Maya sat in her small FBI field office cubicle, the glow of her computer screen casting shadows across her face. Reports on a separate case, financial fraud in a local corporation, stacked her desk. But her mind was elsewhere. A grainy photo of Hargrove, pinned to a corkboard, stared back at her. The officer was under internal investigation, thanks to the trial's exposure. But progress was slow, and Maya's instincts told her the department was circling its wagons. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, speaking at a youth group tonight. "Wish me luck." She smiled faintly, typing back, "You've got this. Proud of you." Ethan had changed since the verdict. The trial's weight lingered, but he'd found purpose, volunteering to mentor kids in their neighborhood, sharing his story to warn them about the system's traps. Maya saw their late mother in him, her resilience, her quiet strength. But the victory was bittersweet. Anonymous threats had started arriving, voicemails left on her work phone. Cryptic notes slipped under her apartment door. "Back off, agent," she hadn't told Ethan, not wanting to burden him. But the warnings only fueled her fire. Tonight, Maya was set to speak at a community forum in a West End church, a grassroots event organized to demand police reform. She adjusted her blazer, her FBI badge tucked away. She was there as a citizen, not an agent. The church basement was packed, folding chairs filled with residents, activists, and a few wary police liaisons. Ethan sat in the front row, his eyes bright with pride as Maya took the podium. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. "My brother's trial showed what's wrong with our system: flimsy charges, missing evidence, officers who think they're untouchable. Ethan's free, but too many others aren't. We need transparency, accountability, and consequences." Her words were measured but fierce, each one landing like a stone in still water. The crowd nodded, some clapping, others whispering agreement. A young woman in the audience stood, her voice trembling. "What about Hargrove? He's still out there, patrolling our streets." Murmurs grew louder, and Maya's jaw tightened. "The investigation's ongoing," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But we're watching, and we won't stop pushing." The room erupted in applause, but Maya's eyes caught a man in the back, his face obscured by a hoodie, slipping out early. Her instincts prickled. Something about him felt off. After the forum, Ethan hugged her, his grin wide. "You killed it, Maya. They're listening. They're angry," she corrected, her tone soft but serious. "Anger's a start, but it's not enough." She scanned the room, the hooded man's absence nagging at her. As they left, a local organizer handed her a flyer for a city council hearing on police oversight. "You should testify," the woman said. "Your voice carries weight now." Maya nodded, tucking the flyer into her bag. "I'll be there." But her mind was on the threats, the investigation, and a growing suspicion that Hargrove wasn't an isolated bad apple. Her FBI training had taught her to spot patterns, and the trial had exposed cracked, sloppy reports, missing footage, a department too quick to defend its own. She needed evidence, something concrete to tie Hargrove to broader corruption. Back at her apartment, Maya pored over public records, her laptop screen a mosaic of police complaints and disciplinary files. A name kept surfacing: Sergeant Michael Torres, Hargrove's partner during Ethan's arrest. Torres had a history of complaints, all dismissed, and a connection to a precinct captain with a reputation for shielding officers. Maya's pulse quickened as she cross-referenced dates and cases, uncovering a string of similar arrests: young black men, vague charges, no body cam footage. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread, and she'd pull until it unraveled. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered, her voice cautious. "Jackson." A distorted voice rasped through the line. "You're digging where?" You shouldn't. Stop, or you'll regret it. The call ended before she could respond. Maya stared at the phone, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. She saved the number, forwarding it to a colleague for tracing, though she doubted it would lead anywhere. The threat confirmed she was onto something. Someone was scared. The next morning, Maya woke to a news alert, a leaked story on a local blog, accusing her of fabricating Ethan's bruises to sway the trial. The article, thinly sourced, quoted an anonymous police source and hinted at her overzealous FBI agenda. Maya's blood boiled. She recognized the tactic. Victor Klein's fingerprints were all over it. The Ada, humiliated by the verdict, was fighting dirty, trying to tarnish her credibility. She called Reed, who'd stayed in touch post-trial. "Klein's behind this," she said, her voice tight. "He's trying to bury me before I can push further." Reed sighed. "He's got allies in the department. Be careful, Maya. You're a target now." "I've been a target my whole life," she shot back. "This is just louder." She hung up, her mind racing. The smear was a distraction, but it was working. Her FBI supervisor had already texted, asking for a meeting to discuss her public profile. She'd need to tread carefully, balancing her advocacy with her career. That evening, Maya met Ethan at a community center, where he was leading a workshop for teens. She watched from the back, her heart swelling as he spoke, his voice steady. "The system's not your friend," he told the kids, "but you're stronger than it. Stay smart, stay alive." The teens listened, rapt, and Maya saw her brother becoming a leader, his trauma forging purpose. Afterward, they grabbed coffee at a nearby diner, the neon sign buzzing in the dusk. Ethan stirred his drink, his expression serious. "You're doing too much, Maya. I see you stressing. What if they come after you? Let them try," she said, her tone fierce. "I'm not backing down. Not for you, not for anyone." She paused, softening. "But you need to stay safe. No hero stuff, okay?" He grinned, a spark of his old mischief returning. "Says the woman who flashed an FBI badge in court." She laughed, the sound rare and fleeting. But as they left, her eyes caught a familiar figure across the street, the hooded man from the forum. Watching from a shadowed alley, she tensed, her hand brushing her concealed holster, but he vanished into the crowd. Ethan didn't notice, and she didn't tell him, not wanting to dim his light. Back home, Maya's laptop glowed with new findings. An internal memo, leaked through a whistleblower contact, hinting at a precinct-wide policy to prioritize compliance in certain neighborhoods. Code for aggressive policing. Hargrave's name appeared in related reports. Tied to a captain who'd mentored Torres, the pieces were falling into place. A conspiracy taking shape. Maya saved the files, encrypting them, her mind on the city council hearing. She'd testify, expose the pattern, and let the chips fall. As she shut her laptop, another note slid under her door, the handwriting sharp, "Last warning." "Drop it." Maya stared at it, her fear swallowed by defiance. She tucked the note into a drawer, evidence for later. The fight was escalating, and she was ready to meet it head-on. The Atlanta skyline glittered under a late spring dusk, its lights a mosaic of hope and struggle. 6 weeks had passed since Ethan Jackson's acquittal, and the city was still grappling with the trial's aftermath. Maya Jackson stood in her apartment, her reflection sharp in the window as she adjusted her blazer. Tonight, she would testify at a city council hearing, armed with evidence of police misconduct that could shake the department to its core. Her FBI badge, clipped to her belt, felt heavier than ever, not a shield, but a responsibility. Anonymous threats had intensified, notes, calls, a slashed tire, but they only sharpened her resolve. The system had tried to break her brother, and now she'd make it answer. Downstairs, Ethan waited in their shared car, his college backpack slung over one shoulder. He'd grown into a quiet confidence since the trial, mentoring teens at the community center, his voice a beacon for kids like him. "You ready for this?" he asked as Maya slid into the driver's seat, her expression steely. "Born ready," she said, her lips curving slightly. "You." He grinned, a spark of his old mischief. "Just don't flash your badge this time. Let the evidence do the talking." She laughed, the sound rare and grounding. But her mind was on the folder in her bag, leaked memos, complaint logs, and a whistleblower's affidavit tying Officer Daniel Hargrove and Sergeant Michael Torres to a precinct captain's pattern of covering up misconduct. The evidence wasn't airtight, but it was damning enough to demand action. The hearing was her chance to lay it bare. The city council chamber was packed, the air thick with tension. Residents filled the seats, their signs demanding "End police abuse and justice now." Reporters lined the walls, cameras rolling, while council members sat at a long table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. Maya recognized a few faces from the community forum, including the young woman who'd challenged her about Hargrove. Ethan sat in the front row, his presence a quiet anchor. When Maya's name was called, she approached the podium, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The council president, a stern woman in her 50s, nodded. "Agent Jackson, you have 5 minutes." Maya's voice was clear, cutting through the room's hum. "Thank you. I'm here as a citizen, a sister, and an FBI agent who's seen the system fail too many. My brother Ethan was nearly destroyed by a baseless charge, and the trial exposed a pattern officers like Daniel Hargrove, protected by a department that buries complaints and loses evidence." She held up her folder, her eyes sweeping the council. "I have documents showing a precinct captain shielded Hargrove and others, dismissing complaints, ignoring patterns of aggressive arrests targeting black and brown youth. This isn't one bad officer. It's a culture." The room erupted, gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd. A councilman, known for his police union ties, shifted uncomfortably. Maya pressed on, detailing the memo's compliance policy, the string of dropped body cam footage, the whistleblower's claim of internal pressure to close ranks. Her words were precise, each one a hammer striking the department's armor. "We need independent oversight, mandatory body cams, and real consequences. Anything less is complicity." As she finished, the crowd roared, applause drowning out the council's gavel. Ethan's eyes shone with pride, and the young woman from the forum nodded fiercely. But Assistant District Attorney Victor Klein, seated in the back, watched with a tight jaw, his allies in the police department whispering furiously. Maya had expected pushback. Klein's leaked smear stories had already painted her as a rogue agent, but she was ready. The council president called for order, her voice strained. "Thank you, Agent Jackson. We'll review your submission." But the room's energy was unstoppable. Residents chanting no more cover-ups. As Maya returned to her seat, Ethan squeezed her hand, whispering, "You just changed the game." The hearing stretched late, with residents echoing Maya's call for reform. By the next morning, her testimony was headline news, clips of her speech looping on local stations. The police department issued a defensive statement, promising full cooperation with Hargrove's investigation, but Maya knew better. Her evidence had forced their hand, and within days, the city announced disciplinary hearings for Hargrove and Torres, with the captain under scrutiny. It wasn't a conviction, but it was a crack in the wall. Maya's FBI supervisor called her in, his tone a mix of caution and respect. "You're making waves, Jackson. The brass isn't thrilled, but your work's solid. Just watch your back." She nodded, aware her advocacy was straining her career. The threats hadn't stopped a brick through her car window, a hissed voicemail, "You're done." But she saved every one, building a case, her training keeping her sharp. Ethan, meanwhile, was thriving. At the community center, he led workshops, teaching teens how to navigate police encounters, his story resonating. One evening, Maya watched him speak, his voice steady as he told a group, "They'll try to scare you, make you feel small, but you're bigger than their badge." A 15-year-old boy, eyes wide, asked, "What if they lie, like they did to you?" Ethan's answer was firm, "You tell the truth louder, and you don't stop." Maya's heart swelled. Her brother was becoming the man she'd always known he could be. Her fight reached a national stage when she was invited to speak at a justice reform conference in D.C. The event, packed with activists, lawmakers, and media, was a platform to amplify her message. Standing at the podium, her voice carried the weight of every case she'd seen, every threat she'd faced. Justice isn't a verdict, it's a system that doesn't prey on the vulnerable. We rebuild it by exposing the truth, no matter the cost. The audience gave a standing ovation, and organizers approached her afterward, offering partnerships to expand her advocacy. She accepted, knowing the road ahead was long. Back in Atlanta, Maya and Ethan stood on their apartment balcony, the city sprawling below. The skyline, once a backdrop to their struggles, now felt like a canvas for change. Ethan leaned on the railing, his voice thoughtful. "You think we'll ever not have to fight?" Maya's gaze was steady, her answer unflinching. "Maybe not, but we'll keep winning, piece by piece." She thought of the disciplinary hearings, the council's promise to review oversight, the kids Ethan was reaching. Small victories, but real ones. Ethan nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "I'm in it with you, Maya. For Mom, for us, for them." He gestured to the city, its lights flickering like stars. She smiled, her hand on his shoulder. "Good, because I need you." The threats, the smears, the system's weight, they hadn't broken her, and they wouldn't. She'd exposed a crack in the machine, and she'd keep prying until it shattered. As they stood together, a breeze carried the city's pulse horns, laughter, the hum of life. Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. Hargrove had been suspended pending a full investigation, and the council was fast-tracking a body cam mandate. She showed Ethan, her lips curving. "See? Piece by piece." He laughed, the sound free and full. "You're unstoppable." "Not me," she said, her eyes glinting. "Us." The fight wasn't over, but for the first time. Maya felt the ground shifting. They turned back to the skyline, ready for the next battle. Their silhouettes framed against Atlanta's endless night.